This is a recording of Fred W. Hopp, 3823 Palm Tree Boulevard, Cape Coral, Florida, 33904. Fred's phone number is area code 813-542-1971. The recording was made on January 19th, 1989 by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center at Fred's home in Cape Coral, Florida. This is tape number 1 of 1 tape. Fred, maybe you could start with your name and address, if you would, please, and your phone number.
Hello, this is Fred Hopp. My present address is 3823 Palm Tree Boulevard, Cape Coral, Florida, 33904. My social security number is 369-18-3144.
What's your phone number over here, Fred?
And the phone number here in Florida is 1-813-542-1971.
Okay. Now maybe you could start us, Fred, back with when and where you started working at Oldsmobile.
When I started working at Oldsmobile, the times were a little tough. I came out of high school. I had industrial course. My dad went to me into the Oldsmobile there and introduced me. He was a long-term employee, and they liked him quite well. He was a machinist, not a machinist, a tool maker.
Mm-hmm.
However, when I hired in under HS, I think it was McDonald or something like that.
Okay.
And he hired me in through the personnel
Oh,
department.
McFarland. That was
HS
it.
McFarland.
McFarland, yeah.
And that was on December 12th, 1940.
All right.
I hired in as a plumber's helper,
Okay.
pipe fitter's helper.
All right.
I was in that department about 5 years, working on different things, areas, servicing machines, and anything that was pertaining to pipe fitting, repair, and like that.
Did you work out in the plant a lot then, Fred?
I worked out in the plant.
Okay.
I was on construction, and I also was on maintenance of the
Okay.
plumbing atmosphere.
Did any particular part of the plant you were assigned to?
I was all over the plant. I was over in press plant. I was in the plating plant, a motor plant, you name it, I was there. I knew the plant like the back of my hand.
Do you remember where the plating plant was?
That was in old building 78 and 75.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time there, and I knew it like the back of my hand.
What was up in the axle plant at that time?
Well, we had the axle plants coming down the line. They was on a conveyor. They were upside down on the line, and they hand-fed them that line at that time.
They did.
I watched it
Mm-hmm.
because I love to go through the plant and watch them assemble cars.
Mm-hmm.
It's altogether different than what it is now,
Yeah.
because I watched in both instances.
Where did they, do you remember where the chassis assembly started?
Chassis assembly started in what they call the old axle plant, just ahead of Building 16.
Okay. Do you remember which way it ran? East, west, or north? Or
Yeah,
south?
it would come out this way. Over here was the restaurant that we used to eat at.
Yeah.
And then it would make a right-hand turn, and then it would go down in Building 16.
Okay, so it was running east and west then.
It was running east and west.
Parallel with Olds Avenue, or Isaac Street at that time, maybe.
Probably Isaac Street.
Yeah.
Olds Avenue was over here.
Yeah. Okay. And let's see, were the old buildings 1B, 2B, 10, 8, you remember those?
Oh yes, I remember them all.
What was going on down in that area around the smokestack?
Well, we had, that was the old pipe shop.
Okay.
And we was located in that. When I hired in, that's where I worked, spent a lot of time there.
What kind of a building was that?
Well, that was a rickety building. It was a wooden building.
It was a wooden building?
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And what I can recall, it's vivid in my mind because it comes back just like that. Your brain functions that way. You can store it 50 years and then bring it back, or you can have it 2 weeks
Right.
and you can store it. But basically, in us older people, we can remember the older stuff easier than the new stuff.
Right.
What we're supposed to remember, we don't remember it.
Okay, so the pipe shop was back, which building was it in? 10? 8?
It was in 10
10, okay.
at that time.
Anybody else in that building with you other than the pipe shop?
We had the tin shop and electricians.
Oh, so a whole bunch of the
A
plant
whole
engineering
bunch of
shops.
maintenance was in that one. It was about a block long.
All right,
And then the paint shop was just over the way.
all right. And was the powerhouse was right there next to you someplace?
Yeah, the powerhouse was there. I knew old Walter Slack. I knew all the guys.
Was the powerhouse used to make steam at that time, or was it
The
not?
powerhouse was used at that time to generate electricity and give an extra boost. And then also, I think they made steam. Yeah, they made steam. And then air pressure,
Okay, compressed air.
compressed air.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What were in some of those other older buildings over there, Fred? Can you remember any of the other ones?
Well, we had plating dip tanks that they
Okay.
dipped by hand, and they plated like in the 41 Oldsmobile. They had these little tiny grills on each side of
Yeah,
the
remember
headlights,
those.
under
Yeah.
the headlights.
Yeah.
They plated those, and then various small parts of that beautiful Oldsmobile. I had 2 of those 41s.
But the plating for those little parts was done there rather than up in the big plating plant up in
Right.
78.
Well, they didn't have the big plating plant yet. This
Oh,
is
all
a
right.
feature added in
right.
15 years down the road.
Okay. So 78 wasn't a plating plant at this point in time.
No, that's right.
All right. What was up in 78 then?
Storage for shells, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, the war came along very shortly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. They didn't start producing cars until after the war, you know,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
about in 45,
Now in the
46.
the press plant was located mostly where?
In building 50, and 56 was a new press plant.
All right. Was
Yeah.
34 there, building 34? Do you remember what was in that?
And there, 34, more or less, was part storage from the
Okay.
Bondurite and the washers and stuff like that,
All right.
which we serviced on Saturdays and
You
Sundays.
did. All right. Okay. And then as you moved further to the east, you'd run into the engine plant.
Yep.
And what was in like building 36 and 38 at that early time?
36 and 38 housed, I think, the 8-cylinder motor. They machined there. 28, building 28. And they machined a 6-cylinder motor, straight 6.
Yeah.
And of course it goes back quite a bit of time. And they made pistons, they machined pistons, they Bondurite pistons,
Mm-hmm.
and plated them. And they had all kinds of operations, wash operations, machining operations, drilling operations, and like that.
Okay. Then, now that was 1940. And then in 41, the war started and we stopped making cars sometime in there.
Yeah, we were only able to produce about 5,000 of the, or 50,000 of the 1942 model.
Mm-hmm.
And in that model, we had used cast iron pistons,
Okay.
which we had hooked up a brand new zinc plating machine to zinc plate the pistons, but we couldn't go any further. We didn't even zinc plate one lousy piston because they cut off the production of automobiles.
And then what were we making during the war?
Well, we made shells,
Okay.
guns,
Yeah.
20 millimeters, underground test,
Yeah.
and we made the big guns for ships. We made the small round shell in building in the press plant, 56, 50, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And I think 75 was that too. They made the shells.
All right.
Of course, we're going back a lot of time and we're jumping around.
That's all right.
So,
Where were the 20 and 37 millimeter guns made?
20 millimeter guns were made in Building 28, I think. And they were tested outside of Building 56 in an underground shootout, so to speak. And we'd have to go down there and service them, and once in a while the yard boys would have to chisel through 20 inches of cement to get to a spot.
Really?
Yeah, it was thick cement.
Yeah.
They had to have it in order to stop the bullets.
Yeah.
Because those are intended for Jap planes instead of
Right.
Oldsmobile workers,
Right.
so to speak.
Right.
Tiffy! I have to put her out in the garage if she keeps up.
Yeah.
What else we got?
Okay. Now the. Did we make other components during the war, Fred, other than guns and?
Guns,
And
shells,
shells.
caps. Let me see. Bomber landing gears at the Ryan Bone.
Okay. Now that was over to the old forge plant, or
That's over the old forge plant.
okay. Now was that? Were we just forging those over there, or we were machining them?
We was forging them, hammering them out, and forging in the shape.
Okay.
And I think they might have machined some, but I don't know how much. I
All
never
right.
paid any special
Yeah.
attention.
Did you get over there on occasion?
Well, I worked over there on a plumbing gang and a maintenance, packing steam hammers and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So I run into a lot of that stuff, and I
Yeah.
could casually observe what was going on,
Sure.
of which you could do that.
Yeah. That was during the war also that you went over
Well,
there?
that was towards the end of the war.
All right, towards the end of it.
And they were just cleaning up the stuff. And of course, I was quite young at the start of the war. And then when I come back, I was still young too,
Yeah.
but I wasn't too good at health.
You mentioned packing steam hammers. What was that? What kind of a job was that?
Well, you get up on top of a steam hammer about 35 feet in the air,
Yeah.
and you'd have to repack the cylinder on those. The plumbers would have to do that.
Okay.
Now the millwrights do.
That when you're talking repacking, though, what are you packing? Where the piston rod?
Steam, yeah, the piston comes down and gives it a punch.
Right. You were packing the where
Oh
the
yeah, we
piston rod
would
slid.
pack those, yeah.
Okay.
And that would, so that they wouldn't leak or they'd
Yeah.
have the pressure and they could do the job properly. So.
Okay.
Because you had to pull a lot of pressure down on the bomber landing gears and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. What other kinds of machinery did we have over there at that time? Did they have any press operations, forge pressing?
Well, they had a little forge pressing. They had gas tanks in it, I think, if I remember right. They punched gas tank halves at one time or another. And of course they're over there now. They punch them over there. What else would they have? Now I'd be getting the jet plant mixed up
Yeah.
with the main plant.
I was gonna say. I think the gas
And
tank.
the Ryan
business,
boat.
Yeah. Right.
Or the Oldsmobile press
Yeah.
plant.
Yeah.
Because it got to be quite a big operation.
Right. It sure did.
And taking over the Fisher body there, I remember I'd go over there and watch them get the bodies out of there as a kid. At 16-year-old, I loved to do that. I watched those cars being built in the early, well, I remember 37 miles coming off the line. Because I'd stand out on the old bridge, Logan Street Bridge, and watch them come out of the car, the shiny beauties, you know, and long to have one someday.
Oh, yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I finally was able to get one in 41.
Okay. Yeah.
Brand new.
Yeah.
Imagine an 18-year-old kid having a brand new Oldsmobile in front of his house, and the kids, I told them one day I was going to go down and buy me a brand new car, and they didn't believe me. Next day I showed up in an Oldsmobile.
Yeah.
That was unheard
Big
of.
surprise.
Oh, yeah. That hurt them,
Yeah.
because they couldn't even afford an old Chevrolet or something,
Right.
5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
And here a young kid would come in working for Oldsmobile with a brand new car.
Yeah. Yeah.
An Oldsmobile on top of that, 66 four-door sedan.
Yeah.
Light blue, baby blue, just like
yeah.
the car I have out in the garage now, a
Nice.
blue color.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Okay, now after the war, Fred, what did you end up doing?
Well, after the war, I came back to my old job. And of course, during the last part of it, up until then, I filled in on vacations as a typist. I had learned myself how to type and like that at home, and I took 1 hour of that in school, and I was pretty good at it. And then they transferred me on salary to make out these automotive reports, you know.
Which are...
How many cars was built that day.
Oh, the production
We typed the reports ourselves and got them ready for the production, the top brass meeting early in the morning, and they all had to be on their desk before when the day progressed. So they know how many cars is built, how many engines is built, and all that stuff. So
all right.
all recorded.
What did that department, what was its name?
That was material control under good old Alex E. Retzlaff.
Okay.
A good friend of mine.
Alex
The best
Retzlaff.
supervisor they had in Oldsmobile as far as I was concerned.
Okay. Tell me about Alex. What kind of a guy was Alex?
Alex was a man of my own liking. He stood behind his men. He loved his men. If he was wrong, he wasn't afraid to come and tell you. And if he was right, he gave you the applause. I mean, if you were right, he'd give you the applause. And he'd treat you like a human being. He was a good man. I liked him. And of course, I thought very highly of him. He was well deserving as a supervisor. And those are few and far between. Believe me. But he retired early, and of course he had about 3 years retirement, and then they found out he had cancer and he'd passed away.
Yes. Yeah.
Before he passed away, he came back to me, shook my hand, and apologized for anything that he might have done that was wrong. He wanted forgiveness. But at the time, I couldn't think of anything that he might have done. But I said, sure, Alex, you're my friend. Embraced him and thanked him. Say. And he was happy. Then that was the main thing.
Sure.
That's what life's about.
How many people in the department at that time, Fred? About?
Well, in the material control, overall, with purchased parts and etc., we had about 200.
200 people.
220 people. Now this is on the salaried end.
Yeah, that's all I'm talking about, right.
In my immediate department, we had about 25, 30 people in our group. And gradually over the years, it would gradually go down.
Okay. But your tasks for your little immediate department was kind of like the schedules and that sort of thing?
Well, we scheduled various things. We made reports, we recorded them, produced them, and got them out to what needed was, at that time, they had to have them, say.
Yeah.
Then over the years, as it progressed, other things come up. As they increased in efficiency, then some of these could be cut out eventually, and then we just did what was necessary.
Yeah.
Of course, my job progressed into handling the raw steel.
Oh, okay.
And I got on the raw steel deck. I would schedule the parts to production.
Mm-hmm.
I'd tell them how many of fenders, gas tanks, or anything else to make. I would release the steel and a lot ticket to the steel room. They'd deliver the steel to wherever it was processed at, on a press or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would manufacture the parts. And of course, this is a monthly basis, day. I would figure all the inventories for all the parts for the whole Oldsmobile plant.
Mm-hmm.
Now this was for 7 cotton picking years.
Mm-hmm.
I had the whole charge of every manufactured part that went out of the place. I would figure all the inventories. I would release all the parts to production. I would see that they were all manufactured and available. I had to do a lot of substitution of raw material because we ran too close to the shoulder on that.
Mm-hmm.
We had slowdowns on receiving the steel, so we had to make a substitution. So I'd grab something over here, substitute on this part, and told them to go ahead if I knew what type of steel it was. I would take steel that was not even draw quality aluminum coil, and I made 98 fenders out of the crazy thing.
Mm-hmm.
This saved the company a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd only make 200 of them.
Mm-hmm. Enough to keep them going.
Enough to keep them going and keep them out of my hair, and out of the general manager's hair. This was the idea there.
But then you'd have to reorder something to get it coming again.
We would reorder when we needed.
Mm-hmm.
But you bear in mind, this was my job too, to requisition the steel for the whole plant. Everything, right down the line. And I had quite a few parts. I didn't have no free time. I would work anywhere from 8 to 12 hours a day on a job. And of course, I got overtime, and then for a while there I wasn't paid overtime because that was part of the job. But when a production supervisor, a superintendent, or a general supervisor would call me for something, an emergency, I would stay after hours on my own time and do the job, get him running so he wouldn't have his tail in the binder to the general manager. In other words, the general manager couldn't say, how come we didn't ship these parts? Well, old Freddie boy stepped in, had them manufacture the parts, got them off the hook, got them painted, bonded right, and the whole works, and got them to hang out of here for BOP assembly, and like that wherever it was short. And we provided all those points of assembly. Now this entails, that job was a very important job, but it wasn't paid for an important job, believe me. It was just a menial task you would do in your own rights because of the love of the company. You want to show them that you're going to do a job and you're going to do it better than anybody else could possibly do it. And you did it. And maybe they might have been grateful, I don't know. But anyway, I felt good when I left every day. I went home, enjoyed myself.
What were some of the typical problems, Fred, that you'd run into doing that sort of task?
Well, we had too many shortages all the time. And we'd have to run a steel shortage report year long, you know. 10, 20 different sizes. And then we'd have to show a day-to-day progression on the hour. We'd make long-distance telephone calls to different places, and we would contact purchasing, and they'd go out and get us the steel wherever necessary. I had one instance there that purchasing bought 045 gauge steel in 1949 Oldsmobile, which was, we built 468,066 vehicles that year. But we also made 75,000, 50,000 of them out of 045 gauge steel instead of 033 to 038. Now, when you are an old steel man, or you know what I'm talking about, then you understand what I'm saying. However, I took an inventory in mid-year. Vic Brown came down, says, "Fred, what do we need?" I say, "Well, I'm going to sign 2 scrap tickets, each for 50,000 front fenders on the Oldsmobile. And I got to have the steel in 6 weeks." And I went to purchase them. I says, "That steel that I'm giving you a scrap ticket for today that I'm writing, you get the steel in here inside of 6 weeks, or you're going to shut down Oldsmobile production." And I had the bigwigs from accounting all over my desk and from the tower. I says, "Well, if you want to run the automobile and build it out, buy the steel, because you ain't going to make it." And this is the power I had on that job. I signed a ticket, 50,000 fenders right and left. Did you know I got a lot of flack from that? But I was right. When we ended up with steel that I asked to build, you know how many we had? We had 238 excess left-handed fenders and 245 excess right-handed fenders. And all the raw material we got was put in the fenders.
So it's almost perfect, actually.
It came out perfect. It's just what I had figured. We had it skinned so close that if they had a couple hours more production, they wouldn't have made it. They'd been short fenders. They'd have to pull them out of service.
Well, how come, Fred, why didn't the guys or gals or whoever know...
Woke up to the fact?
Yeah, right.
Well, sometime, like they say, these guys that was in purchasing didn't know sometimes what the right hand or the left hand doeth. In other words, they had forgotten that they had given a heavier spec, and they didn't realize it was bringing in a higher spec. Because it was easier to bring in the thicker and give you more tonnage, but they didn't tell nobody.
Yeah, and it didn't make more fenders, though.
This clerk had to find out about it. And then, of course, we rectified the area, bought a lot of more fender steel, and built the cars out for 49. And hey, we did all right. We made it.
Who was your purchasing guy that you were working with? Do you remember?
Clay Denier.
Clay Denier. Okay.
Yeah, you know him.
Name is familiar.
And he's a fine man. If Freddie said, "Hey, Clay, I need this," he says, "Okay, we'll have it for you." He went out and got it. He didn't question it because he knew I knew what I was talking about. Because I was an authority in the steel procurement, steel disbursement, and parts manufacture. And nobody could put it past me. And I'll tell you, I was so busy on that job, I would release some steel that I stole from one spot, from a size steel, for a substitution. I didn't stole it, I just swiped it.
You just
substituted
it.
Brought it over, used it, and I didn't cover it with a lot ticket until 2 weeks later, because I didn't have enough time to write that lot ticket. And I had it recorded in here on memory, right to the T. And I recorded, I'd go back, write the ticket and cover steel delivered so-and-so, send it out to good old Al Bass, good friend of mine. He had charge of the steel room.
Okay.
And when I went on to this job of parts release man and steel handling, the man that took sick, Harold Schofield, got chicken pox, and the boss says, "Here, Fred, go to work." And he didn't even tell me how to release any of it. I had to learn by myself. Well, anyway, I contacted El Bass, and I says, "Now, how do I specify when I want him to turn that sheet around and cut it?" He said, "Just say, cut crosswise, C over C." And that's where I found out how to do that. The boss didn't tell me that. And I learned a lot of this stuff from start to go, right down the line, and no mistakes made, so to speak, saving the corporation a lot of money, and putting them in competition with the best of them. And our production would go up, and we could build more cars, but we had to let Buick and Pontiac build a few. They were hurting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chevrolet was even with the board. But the Oldsmobile and Cadillac at that time carried a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever they were tight, you know, in periods of slackness in sales,
Yep.
they are the ones that carried it. We would build all the time 96,000 Oldsmobiles a month.
Mm-hmm.
And that entails a lot of steel.
It sure does. Yeah.
Especially at 925 pounds to a car, and we were only using 715.
Okay, we're back on.
Now they wondered why they only used about 715 pounds of steel to build those cars, because they built the cars with less steel than what the county told them they had to use.
Mm-hmm. So how did we do that?
By the steel that I saved them in substitution and cutting off pieces, putting the steel room, and then go back and grab it when I needed the parts.
Mm-hmm.
Then I didn't have to buy that offal that fell off the end of the sheet that was sheared, see?
You didn't have some process engineer or somebody like that telling you how to orient the part on the sheet and that sort of
I
thing?
didn't have nobody.
Nobody was helping.
I'd have to tell a process engineer how to do his job,
Mm-hmm.
because he was 2 years behind what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I was by touch and feel, and the Lord directed me how to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and I done it
Mm-hmm.
to His glory.
Who were some of the process guys you had to work with? You remember any of those guys, Fred?
I don't remember any of them because I didn't work with very many.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
Because they say, hey, this operation is running so good, we ain't gonna put our hands on it. Say?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you get the answer? You know what it was?
See, we had a shot blaster and a slitter in there someplace in time. You remember those things?
We had a slitter in, I think it was in building, it was a steel.
37.
37.
That's where it started.
Well, it would be right next to 37. It would be that way of it, east of 37. We had a slitter in there. We slit our own steel.
Did you have anything to do with the scheduling, so to speak, to that thing?
Yeah, I scheduled quite a bit. I had emergency slits for parts I had to have.
Mm-hmm.
I cut up large coils of steel to have narrower coils.
Mm-hmm.
And I salvaged fall off, 1.5 wide, banded it, shoved it in the steel room, and then I went back and used it and run it through a press that took 1.5 inch steel. See? And that's one place. This is how we were able to save that much money each year.
Mm-hmm.
These little diversities that you'd come up with, the man on the deck, which would have access to it. Now the supervisor didn't even know what was going on. He was in the dark.
Yeah.
And like I say, my good friend Alex Retzloff, I was doing a lot extra stuff over and above when I was working for him than he even knew about, or any of the others. In other words, I was in a position that I was basically accountable to nobody. I had done things in the department to expedite it. Brother Blow was supposed to sign the orders, the director of the department. Nuts to that. He says, one day he let us slip, and he says, Freddie, you can sign them yourself. You can't get a hold of me. I says, okay. So every order after that, regardless, I signed H.L. Blow and my initials underneath it. And this went on for 7 years, and he didn't know how come he didn't sign nothing to buy something.
Yeah.
So I bought it for him.
See, Harold Blow then was Retzloff's boss?
No, Harold Blow was the director of the department at that time.
All right. And Retzloff worked for him.
Retzloff was the general supervisor under him, under the material control, manufactured parts area.
Mm-hmm.
This came under him.
Yep.
And of course, they had a lot more departments that came under Harold Ball. Purchase parts, uh, gumbo and that stuff you had to buy to manufacture and assemble the
Mm-hmm.
different parts of the
Mm-hmm.
car. Underwrite, prime, all that stuff. They had to buy the raw material to
Yeah.
do those effective operations.
See, there was a schedules group too. Where did they fit into all that? Production schedules.
Production schedules would be working more or less. They worked off a computer earlier than we did.
Yeah.
We didn't get into the troubles on a computer until further down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course,
All of the stuff you initially did, Fred, it was just on paper or cards or something, wasn't it?
you want to shut that off a minute?
Right.
How we kept track of our records, we had individual parts card on each part. We had large parts deck. Now, like I mentioned earlier in an interview, I mentioned about 7 years there I had all the steel deck all along. When a new supervisor came in, which took over the plumb of the department that we were supposed to inherit, but then he saw I had too much work, so he split my deck down the middle. Got another man in the department, Tommy Beelan. Of course, we worked together. He took a group of parts, and I had the other group.
Okay.
So we split it down the middle.
Who was the new supervisor?
Bob Waters.
That was after Alex retired?
That was after Alex retired.
Okay.
Waters took over from Alex.
Mm-hmm.
However, when the split was made, down the road about another 3 years, they found out they didn't have enough deck men, so we had 5 men.
5?
Instead of 2.
Okay.
So that relieved it. Screwed it up, but
yeah, had the quantity of steel grown that much in that period of time? Sizes?
Our operations grew.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being 300 to 400,000 a year, we was building 1 million cars a year. We had a need for more paperwork, faster paperwork, and we had to follow it more closely.
Mm-hmm.
Not more closely, but we had to be right on it because the floats were kept down because of the enormity of the amount of steel involved and parts and everything else right down the line, whatever was needed.
Did we try and keep, from a standpoint of inventory, how much steel inventory did we keep days-wise or however you measured it?
They got down to the point when they got on a computer, they tried to hold it to 4 days on hand.
Wow.
But we couldn't live with that. That's us boys would inflate it a little bit, so we had 12 days.
And what was it when you sort of started, Fred? Do you remember?
Well, it was a mishap operation.
Okay.
And we had to go in there. We went in barefooted, so to speak. Went in, organized the thing, and got the thing running. And it was running pretty efficiently. And every once in a while, the supervisor, not the first one I mentioned, but down the line, they'd stick their foot in or the head, and then it got kabooshed, so to speak, and messed it up. And then we had to start over again, get it reorganized. We'd have to take the inventory on the parts and get them straightened out, and then we were on the road again.
Was the inventory business, was that a thing that was done more than the once a year normal inventory then?
Yeah. We had some parts that they would run short for one reason or another. Or maybe the production people would borrow that steel unbeknown to us and put it on something else. And stayed in longer with that other part instead of this one, so their efficiency would go up on the production floor. Well, this is how old Willie Walsheim operated, so to speak. You know. Yeah, I know good old Walsheim. He was a good egg. He was a general superintendent.
People like to run the plant on longer runs than you folks allocated, so to speak.
Yeah, they wanted a full production, and I always went after it so they could. And old Bill would call up, and he needed some part. I'd lean over backwards for him, and I'd get it. And then he'd run it, and then he got his efficiency up, and then he could take it easy later on and then patch up with something else down the road a little smaller. But I worked with production considerably. They knew me. They even called me at home. Now, when we got Tommy Balin on a job, management did not want to pay me for my overtime. I worked 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, casual overtime for about 2.5 years. And finally, Mr. Retzel came and said, we're going to start paying you overtime for turn it in. Then I got to start paying, but I had given to Oldsmobile 2.5 years of my dedicated service of about 2 hours a day overtime on my own time. Because the foreman would call me right at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, just before you're going.
Just before I go out. And I'd always stay there until I had them taken care of and on the road of recovery. In other words, I wouldn't leave the job unfinished or turn it over to somebody else because there's nobody else on that job. I was the only guy.
You didn't have a night shift, did you?
No, I didn't have no night shift. I didn't have no relief. I was all alone. And to give you an idea, we were allowed to have, I think, 7 sick days a year. But I never was told about it. I never knew about it. And for 7 years or better, I never had any sick time.
What'd they do when you went on vacation, Fred?
Pull their hair out. Well, in the way that they learned that I was really doing a good job. But, like I say, when I went on vacation, well, in those days you only got 2 weeks in. So it didn't hurt in. But when you got 5 and 6 weeks, that's when it cut in. But bear in mind, they had 4 or 5 men on that job, so they could absorb without too much trouble.
How did they split the deck business up for 4 or 5 guys then? Was there some logic to that?
Well, there must have been some logic because one guy could only handle so many, so much of it. So.
Did it work better then when you had 4 or 5 guys, or didn't it?
A bumper steel. One guy had just a bumper steel. That was his deck. Of course, you had 6 or 8 different sizes. And that was a chrome-plated deal that you had to follow through with, inventory. But bear in mind, I had the whole thing, all the bumpers when I was
at one time, right.
And I just about killed myself on it, which I did. But like I say, I put in a lot of casual overtime, which was casual. Now, I don't know if anybody ever appreciated it. I never heard from nobody. But I did try to do a good job. I had no guilty conscience. And I felt I did him a good job.
Sure. Sounds like you did. Did Alex, Alex kept track of all of the number of cars that we made?
Yeah.
He had a book.
Yeah.
That had all that data in that.
Right.
I'm now finding that there's several different numbers of cars we made for each year.
That's right. That was in that little car report that we put out.
But we're finding that there's a disparity between various, what I'll call number collectors, that ranges anywhere from just one or two cars, which we don't worry about, to as many as 20 or 30,000 cars different.
What years does that involve?
Well, we've got data that goes all the way back to the turn of the century, and some of those dates or some of those years in the 20s are as far off as 15 and 20,000 cars.
Well, I wasn't born until the 20s,
Yeah,
so
I
I
appreciate that.
But I would guess that in those days they had an overlap of 6 months production, say.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how they get off. In other words, they build that same car for so many periods, say.
Yeah.
Just like our Tornado, when Wolfram introduced that in 46,
66.
latter part of 45.
66.
66.
Yeah.
We produced that car for 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And we built 46,257 of that model.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong on total.
I'd have to go out and get my thing out of the car.
You won't have to because I'm on the nose. Because I had memorized every year in my brain
Mm-hmm.
how many cars we built.
Did you stay on the steel business then? How long did you stay doing that then, Brad?
I was on a steel operation for about 7 years.
27 years.
I couldn't get off of it.
Did you retire from that activity?
I had a temporary lull of being into another segment to relieve the pressure on me in a literal sense,
Mm-hmm.
just before I retired. And it was like ordering, I'd say like gumbo and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Things that we used in the production run, but which had to be taken care of separately from all the others because you had to have a personal touch on.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd have 30, 40 items
Yeah,
too, and
sure.
that'd keep you going.
Yeah. What now? Was that sort of stuff handled in the same manner? Steel?
Well, it was a complete different ball of wax.
It was. Okay. What? What was?
Of course, bear in mind too, I was on that for about 13 months, and then I went back to steel deck again.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
most of my 28 years, 29 years in salary, I spent with the steel, raw
Mm-hmm.
steel, sure, and disbursement.
When did you retire?
I retired May 1st, 1974.
74. Okay. What do you think maybe was the most significant change in all that time you spent working on the steel deck?
Well, it was a gradual acceleration to high volume production of the automotive business. It was a gradual change, took it in stride, and we worked right into it. So we weren't told what to do, but we handled it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Did the volume, like the high volume years, like 55 was a high volume year, and then 56 and 57 and 58 dropped down to a low. Did those cause any changes in how you did that sort of thing?
You mean scheduling and like that?
Yeah. Or did it affect the way you approached the job?
No. We knew just how much we needed,
Mm-hmm.
say.
The schedule guys gave you a schedule.
We got a printout from IBM,
Mm-hmm.
more or less, and we would follow with a little common sense, pretty close to that.
Mm-hmm.
It was inaccurate a lot of times.
Yeah.
So we had to go by sense and feel,
Mm-hmm.
and this is how we handle it. And we never was over to speak of, and we never wasted anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was all utilized in the course of manufacture.
Yeah.
I think old Lindy Glazer
I remember Lindy.
would admit to that.
He was out in Steel Road.
He was a personal friend of mine. He was a good man.
Yep.
He was Al Bass's boss.
Mm-hmm.
And I got along with all of them real good.
Was Bob Waters there when you retired, Brad? Or had it
We
changed?
retired on the same day.
He retired same time. Okay.
Well, we had our party together,
Joint party.
so to
Okay.
speak.
Yep. And Harold Blow was still there, or had he?
He had gone earlier.
All right.
Now, who was the character that followed Harold Blow?
See, I was trying to remember who that was.
I can't think of his name.
I think of Ray Federer, but that was
Ray
not that. He
Federer
was on
was
the other
up in the
side.
tower.
Yeah, he was on the other. Yep.
You know, that's a funny thing. I can't think of that guy's name.
Hmm.
I know he lives over by the Kalamazoo Street School.
Yeah.
I know where he lives and everything.
Not important.
No. I worked for him about 12 or 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't even remember his name.
Like you say, it's the later ones you forget.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't too bad, actually, as a director. He had faults like the rest of them.
Yeah, we all do.
But I got along better with Blow because he knew I was doing a job and he liked me, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever I was doing was right.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's all I cared about.
Yeah.
Get the job done, go home, enjoy myself, and come back in the next day.
Sure. Who was the best boss you had then, Brad?
Like I say, Alex Rutzel
Alex. Okay.
and Charlie Nichols.
Oh, Charlie Nichols. Okay.
He was the younger boss. When the chips were down, he was there to be my friend.
Any, what I'll call other unique happenings that you can remember? Did the strike, the steel, I remember big steel strike a few times in there. Did those things cause any peculiar happenings?
When we had a big steel strike, we'd always stock up ahead on aluminum kill steel.
Okay.
Basically.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was one thing you wouldn't be getting from warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told to buy 3 months production ahead. So this is what we did.
Okay.
Scheduled in, got it in the plant. So if they did have a steel strike, it wouldn't hurt us after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or our own, but we didn't have any of our own because we had pretty good labor management teams. They worked together pretty good at Oldsmobile. They had no problems because it was just the supplying steel mills. Of course, I don't know what they would do for steel now. With the Japanese took out 31 steel mills.
Yeah, right.
If they ever try to fight a war now, I don't think they could.
We'll have to go back to using tin cans.
That's right. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. The steel strikes didn't, other than the big buildups, and then we must have had a period where we then didn't buy anything if we had a big buildup.
The steel mills would say, hey, we got to have some orders. So we gave them orders.
Uh-huh.
But we tapered it off to a limited amount and gradually build up, and they didn't know if this was for production or what it was for. But it did give them a chance to get in there and get started and get the furnaces fired up and keep them fired up. Because once they shut them down, boy, they're in trouble for 32 days. You couldn't start them up again.
Yep.
You ever go through a steel mill?
Yep, have.
I went through it once. And I thank the Lord I never had to work in that place.
Right. A little different.
Yep. That day we went through, and one of the workers fell into the red hot mix. They took that, the slag and the pot of metal and took it and dumped it in the oven, buried it. That was the man's grave site. That was it. It was ironic.
Yep, not much less of a person to do that.
That's right. And then on top of that, they was running, at that time, Cadillac bumper bar steel. Well, the aluminum kill pellets come into a pail with aluminum kill pellets on the outside.
Yeah.
They threw it right in with the bumpers.
Really?
Well, it would disintegrate.
Sure.
It wouldn't know.
Yeah,
You wouldn't know the
you'd never
difference
know the
anyway.
difference,
But it was really something to see that,
Yeah.
you know, how it was manufactured and how it comes out, and the rolling mills and all that. That was interesting. But we only got 1 day of that. In all the 28 years there, all I seen was 1 day of that. We should have been scheduled through there, hey, a lot more often, and really know how it works.
To understand.
We just knew one operation, that was it. Whatever we made of that, that was a successful part of our application. Now I notice the way the planners run now, the employees have different segments of education. In other words, it's not so dull like it was in our time. We was right down the road, one job, that was it. Now they have variants with the same pay, of course.
Sure.
And they're learning a lot more, and they're more valuable to the company.
Right.
Of course, we were valuable to the company because nobody else could do our job.
We were very specific.
That's right. We welded right in. Now, what else do we have?
Well, other than, I mean, I'm kind of to the end of where from my questioning standpoint, unless you've got what I'll call other things that you think might be of interest, why, that probably pretty well covers the waterfront. One other question. Where was your office, Brad?
Our office, when I left, was in building, in the front office. It was up on the second floor.
That's building 70.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the office for Miss Early hers was on the third floor.
Sixth floor.
Sixth floor. But she was up in the tower.
Yeah, right.
But Fritz Bennett's had an office, I think, on what, third or fourth?
No, he was up on the sixth floor.
That high?
Yeah. Did you, when you first started, was that building 60? Was that there? The old administration building?
We had the old building 60 when we started.
Where were you in that building?
Well, we was down on the east side of the building, just above the medical department.
Okay, east side must have been on the south end of the building.
Oh, it would be, see, the building ran this way.
You were in 62. You were in 62 or 60?
That was 60.
Okay.
And then they built a new building.
Yeah, you moved.
They indexed it over on the next corner.
Yeah, right.
So to speak. In other words, they had bought all of that up and got rid of the houses in there.
Right.
Tore them down, and they acquired more land and building space, and they built that while they're still in the old buildings.
Yep.
I don't know what they call the new building now.
Well, still call it building 70. Administration building.
Building 70, that's right. The one we was in building 60.
Building 60, yeah. That's right.
We just moved over one block. I remember that move quite vividly. We was taking our personal stuff, material control, putting it on rollers and rolled it over to the new building.
Did you?
Nobody moved us. We moved ourselves.
Yeah. Of course, a lot of people had to move during that thing, so.
Yeah, well, the thing was to have strangers come in and pack it up and then unpack it, or you'd lose it.
Yeah.
So rather than lose what we needed from day to day, we would handle it ourselves personally and put it in the spot where we wanted it. And then we had it right at our fingertips. And that move was functional. And of course, it was successful because you could find that out. We could go right from one into the other, and we was in business.
And you kept going somehow.
Yeah.
Okay.
When did they build that new building?
See, building 70 was built in 1960.
9?
I was going to say 8.
8.
Somewhere in there, 8 or 9.
They had it all paid for when they built it.
Oh, yeah. Paid for all of them when we built it.
They saved that on income tax.
Well, anything else, Fred, you can think of that you'd like to share?
Well, I'm now retired, building another new house, ready to get to move into that.
You know what your address is gonna be, sort of? What street are you on?
Well, I'll be on Fountain Lakes Drive,
Okay,
and the house next to me, which I had bought and then turned it down 2 days later, was 26,380, 365. So mine would be 364.
okay,
No,
it says 63.
4 off of that.
Yeah, yeah.
361.
Okay. So that'll be your new address,
Approximately.
hopefully.
And that would be on Fountain Lakes Drive.
Okay, and
In
that's,
Fountain Lakes.
it's not-
subdivision.
it's not, it's still Cape Coral, is it?
No, Fort Myers.
It's Fort Myers now, all right, okay. Okay, well, it's good to know that, because never know.
Of course, I bought this place over there, and I meanwhile bought a condominium over Fort Myers, and I got to dump that, and then settle down on with a new lot.
Yeah, yeah,
But I was able to get a new lot, and they had raised the price from the time I went for them $3,000, and I hadn't got no money down on it
yeah,
at that time. So I made an offer to build a job on it, subject to one of the lots that they owned at a given price, which would save me the $3,000. They had 2 backups on the build job on it, and they all happened to work out of the way. And they called me last Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago, and says, "Get down here quick, get $1,000 down and buy the lot. You're the first in line." I said, okay, so that's what I did.
yeah,
Now I got the lot.
yeah, now you own it.
Now I can build. I don't have to build up here. I can build up
Right,
here.
right, right,
That's already built.
yeah.